There comes a moment on every profound inner journey when the noise of the world begins to fade, and suddenly you find yourself walking alone. It's not always a dramatic event. Sometimes it begins subtly. Conversations that once brought comfort start to feel hollow. Friendships that seemed unshakable drift apart with no clear reason. The environments that once felt like home become strangely unfamiliar. It is in this quiet and often disorienting space that the test of isolation begins. Isolation is not merely the absence of people, it is the deliberate withdrawal of familiar energies from your life so that the deeper dimensions of your being can awaken. Life has a way of removing distractions when your soul is ready to grow. The outer world retreats so that the inner world can rise, but this stage is often misunderstood. Many interpret it as abandonment, failure, or punishment. In reality, it is one of the most profound spiritual initiations you will ever face. When isolation arrives, your old identity begins to dissolve. The roles you played, the validation you received, the constant interaction that defined your sense of self, all of it starts to fade, and suddenly the mirror you once relied on to understand who you are is gone. This is why isolation feels terrifying. It strips away the external reflections and forces you to face the raw, unfiltered truth of your being. In these moments, the mind grows restless. It searches for old attachments, reaching out like a child in the dark. It tries to reconnect with what was, to rebuild the familiar, to fill the silence with anything that will numb the discomfort. But this stage cannot be bypassed. Every attempt to escape only deepens the lesson. The isolation is not a wall, it is a threshold. You are not being locked out of life, you are being led inward. Inward journeys are rarely gentle. They confront you with everything you buried beneath the noise of daily existence. Old wounds resurface. Forgotten emotions rise. Doubts and fears whisper relentlessly. You begin to see the difference between what you truly feel and what you've been conditioned to believe. The silence acts like a mirror that reflects not the image you present to the world, but the deeper patterns you've long avoided. This is why many people retreat from isolation. They rush to fill the void with distractions, social media, endless work, shallow relationships, or spiritual bypassing. But those who are truly on a path of transformation understand that isolation is not the enemy. It is the furnace where superficial identities are burned away and authentic power is forged. During this phase, time often feels distorted. Days blend together. The world outside seems to move on without you. But what's happening beneath the surface is a quiet metamorphosis. Your nervous system begins to recalibrate. Your energy shifts from outward projection to inward integration. The inner voice, once drowned by external chatter, starts to whisper truths that were always there but never heard. There is a sacred intelligence at work in isolation. It removes the external chorus so that your true voice can finally emerge. The thoughts that rise during this time may be uncomfortable, but they are revealing. You start to notice patterns in your thinking, attachments that drain you, fears that dictate your choices, and desires that were never truly your own. This awareness is not meant to overwhelm you, it is meant to liberate you. The test of isolation also challenges your relationship with validation and belonging. When no one is there to applaud your progress or affirm your worth, you must learn to become your own witness. This is where many falter. They equate the absence of external recognition with lack of progress. But in truth, The most powerful transformations occur in silence, away from the gaze of others. The seed does not sprout under applause, it grows in darkness unseen. As isolation deepens, a shift begins. At first, it feels like a void, but slowly, the void transforms into a vast, expansive space. This is the inner sanctuary, a place within you that is untouched by the world's chaos. Here, you begin to access intuition, creativity, and spiritual insight that were previously blocked by external noise. The stillness becomes a companion rather than an adversary. You stop searching for constant stimulation and start listening to the rhythm of your own soul. It's in this silence that many profound realizations occur. You begin to see the difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the pain of missing connection. Solitude is the power of discovering connection within yourself. The test of isolation transforms loneliness into solitude. It teaches you to become whole without needing constant external input to feel alive. Throughout history, mystics, philosophers, and seekers have intentionally retreated into isolation to access higher wisdom. They understood that solitude is not an escape, but a return to the essence, to the soul, to the unshakable core that exists beneath the shifting tides of life. This test demands courage because it strips away everything false, leaving only what is real. Many will not understand this phase of your journey. Some will interpret your withdrawal as coldness or detachment. Others will fade away because they were only aligned with the previous version of you. But that is part of the test. Isolation reveals not only your inner depths, but also the authenticity of the connections around you. Those meant to walk with your evolved self will find their way back in a new form. Isolation also refines your energetic boundaries. When you spend extended time in silence, you become acutely aware of the kind of energy you allow into your space. Your tolerance for superficiality diminishes. You start choosing quality over quantity, depth over distraction, and alignment over approval. The soul uses isolation to dismantle the ego's dependence on external structures. What remains after this dismantling is not emptiness but clarity. You begin to know who you are without needing the world to tell you. You start to trust your inner compass more than external opinions. You begin to sense that something powerful is being built within you, though it's not yet fully visible. One of the most subtle yet powerful spiritual trials a soul encounters is the test of temptation. Unlike challenges that arrive as obvious struggles, temptation often appears in disguise. It doesn't knock on your door with chaos. It enters quietly, wearing the face of comfort, pleasure, familiarity, or opportunity. It is precisely because of its subtlety that this test becomes so critical in revealing the inner strength and maturity of the soul. Temptation does not always take the form of clear moral wrongs. More often, it is the gentle pull toward what feels easier instead of what is right, the invitation to choose instant gratification over long-term growth, or the seductive call to return to old patterns just when you're on the edge of transformation. It appears at thresholds, moments when your life is shifting, when your consciousness is expanding, when your old self and your emerging self are at odds. Temptation becomes the crossroads where your deepest values and your immediate desires collide. The essence of this test lies in choice. Every time temptation arises, it presents a fork in the road. One path leads toward growth, authenticity, and alignment with your higher self. The other leads back into the familiar loops of comfort, distraction, and unconsciousness. This is why temptation is not about the external thing itself. It's about the internal state it reveals. It shows you where your inner attachments still hold power, where your discipline wavers, and where your convictions have not yet taken root. Temptation often arrives in moments of vulnerability. When you are tired, lonely, overwhelmed, or uncertain, the mind becomes more suggestible. Old habits and desires that you thought were resolved suddenly resurface with renewed intensity. In these moments, the ego whispers softly, convincing you that indulging just this once won't hurt. It offers rationalizations that sound convincing, disguising regression as self-care, stagnation as stability, and indulgence as freedom. The real test lies in whether you can see through the disguise. Many people mistakenly believe that overcoming temptation means suppressing desire altogether. But suppression is not strength, it's resistance that eventually breaks. True mastery over temptation comes from awareness and conscious choice. When temptation arises, the awakened soul does not immediately react. It observes the desire, traces its roots, understands the emotion beneath it, and decides from a place of clarity rather than impulse. Temptation loses its power not when it disappears, but when it is fully seen for what it is. The forms of temptation are as varied as human experience itself. For some, it appears as the lure of old emotional patterns, returning to a toxic relationship because it's familiar, even when you know it no longer serves your growth. For others, it shows up as the desire to abandon discipline in pursuit of temporary comfort, skipping the practices that nurture your spirit, choosing distraction over silence, or giving in to habits that keep you stagnant. Temptation can even come disguised as opportunity, a promotion that feeds the ego but distances you from your true calling, a relationship that looks perfect on the surface but dulls your inner spark, a shortcut that promises success but compromises integrity. The test of temptation is particularly challenging because it often doesn't feel like a test. It feels like relief. It feels like the path of least resistance. This is why many fall into it unconsciously. They don't realize they're standing at a threshold moment. The mind is skilled at creating narratives to justify giving in. It convinces you that comfort equals safety, that resistance means something is wrong, that growth should always feel good. But spiritual evolution rarely follows the path of ease. Growth is often uncomfortable because it demands the dismantling of old identities and the forging of new ones. Temptation also reveals the relationship between ego and desire. The ego thrives on certainty, familiarity, and control. It doesn't like uncertainty or delayed gratification. So when temptation arises, the ego pushes for immediate resolution. It wants to feel good now, not later. It wants to maintain the illusion of control rather than surrender to the unknown. Recognizing this dynamic allows you to step out of the ego's grip and align with your deeper intentions. There is also a collective dimension to temptation. Society constantly feeds desires through advertising, entertainment, cultural expectations, and social validation. You are continuously bombarded with messages that glorify indulgence, speed, and superficial success. Resisting temptation, therefore, is not only an internal act, but also a quiet rebellion against collective conditioning. It requires discernment to distinguish between what is truly yours and what has been implanted by external forces. Another layer of this test involves timing. Often, temptation arises just before a breakthrough. It appears like a final gatekeeper, testing your commitment to your path. This is why many people experience setbacks when they are closest to transformation. They mistake temptation for a sign to turn back rather than recognizing it as the soul's final examination before evolution. The stronger the breakthrough ahead, the more subtle and intense the temptation can become. Temptation also teaches self-awareness. It acts like a mirror reflecting your hidden cravings, unresolved wounds, or unmet needs. Instead of seeing temptation as an enemy, it can be viewed as a teacher. It shows you the parts of yourself that still seek external validation, quick fixes, or comfort over truth. When approached with honesty, temptation can lead to deeper integration of the self. It can reveal where more inner work, compassion, or boundaries are needed. The test of temptation does not end when a single desire is resisted. It evolves as you evolve. Each stage of spiritual growth brings new, subtler forms of temptation. What once tempted you may lose its grip, but new thresholds will appear, each tailored to your current level of awareness. These tests are not punishments, they are necessary stages in the refinement of the soul. Temptation sharpens discernment, strengthens will, and clarifies priorities. It separates superficial intention from deep commitment, revealing the true strength of your inner foundation. There comes a pivotal stage in every spiritual journey where the external world fades into the background and the real confrontation begins, not with others, but with the uncharted depths within. This is the test of inner shadows, a profound and often unsettling encounter with the hidden aspects of the psyche. Unlike external challenges that can be seen and named, this test is inward, subtle, and deeply personal. It is not fought with swords or strategies, but with awareness, honesty, and courage. Shadow represents the parts of ourselves that we've rejected, denied, or hidden away because they were deemed unacceptable by our families, cultures, or even by our own ideals. These are not only negative traits like envy, pride, anger, or fear, they also include suppressed strengths, desires, and potentials that didn't fit the image we wanted to uphold. The shadow is everything that lingers beneath the surface of our conscious identity, shaping our behavior from the background. This test begins when the light of awareness grows strong enough to illuminate these hidden corners, forcing us to confront what we've avoided. At first, encountering the shadow can feel destabilizing. Emotions surge unexpectedly. Old memories resurface. Triggers become more intense. You may begin to notice patterns in your reactions that don't align with your conscious beliefs. Perhaps you experience jealousy toward someone's success, judgment toward others that mirrors your own insecurities, or unexplained resistance toward growth. These moments are not random. They are the psyche's way of revealing what has been buried. The ego, built to preserve a stable self-image, resists this process. It wants to maintain the illusion of being entirely good, rational, or in control. The shadow threatens this illusion, so the ego often responds through denial, projection, or rationalization. Denial hides uncomfortable traits from conscious awareness. Projection attributes those traits to others, making them easier to criticize externally than to acknowledge internally. Rationalization creates stories that justify or soften these traits so they seem less threatening. All of these are defense mechanisms designed to protect the ego's comfort zone. However, the spiritual path demands something different, radical honesty. The test of inner shadows requires looking at these denied aspects without judgment or excuses. It's standing before the inner mirror and seeing not only the admirable parts of yourself, but also the impulses, wounds, and contradictions you'd rather not admit exist. This is why it's called a test, because few are willing to endure this level of self-confrontation. Many retreat back into distraction, convincing themselves they've evolved, while their shadows continue to control them from the background. Shadow work is rarely comfortable because it dismantles illusions. It exposes the gap between who you think you are and who you truly are beneath layers of conditioning. It reveals that moral superiority, spiritual posturing, or emotional detachment often hide unresolved pain. When the shadow emerges, it doesn't do so gently. It surfaces through intense emotional reactions, recurring life patterns, dreams, slips of the tongue, or moments of vulnerability. Each manifestation is like a message from the unconscious asking to be acknowledged and integrated. Integration is the key word here. The shadow is not meant to be destroyed or silenced. It is meant to be understood and integrated into conscious awareness. Integration means accepting that these traits exist, understanding their origin, and reclaiming the energy they hold. For example, anger, when integrated, transforms into clear boundaries and decisive action. Envy, when explored honestly, can reveal unfulfilled desires and guide personal growth. Fear, when faced, can become a source of wisdom and caution. Every shadow aspect contains a seed of potential that can only be accessed through acknowledgement. The test of inner shadows is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process. As consciousness expands, new layers of the shadow become visible. What you once thought was fully resolved may reveal deeper roots. This is not regression, it's evolution. The psyche is complex, and its layers unfold gradually, revealing themselves when you are ready to face them. Each confrontation deepens self-awareness and increases psychological freedom. Relationships often act as mirrors that trigger this test. Interactions with others bring buried traits to the surface. The people who irritate or unsettle you most often reflect aspects of yourself you haven't accepted. This is why the test of inner shadows is intensified in close relationships. They expose your unconscious patterns with ruthless accuracy. Instead of blaming others, this test asks you to look inward, to examine why certain traits in others evoke strong emotional reactions in you. Dreams also play a crucial role in revealing shadows. In dreams, the unconscious speaks in symbols and metaphors, bypassing the defenses of the waking mind. Characters in dreams often embody shadow elements, confronting you with aspects you've ignored. Recurring dream themes or emotionally charged figures are invitations to deeper self-exploration. Paying attention to these messages can offer profound insights into the hidden workings of your inner world. One of the most challenging aspects of this test is the ego's resistance to vulnerability. Admitting to flaws, insecurities, or hidden desires threatens the carefully constructed image the ego presents to the world. It fears rejection, shame, or loss of control. This resistance can manifest as defensiveness, spiritual superiority, or even excessive self-criticism, all ways of avoiding authentic self-encounter. Overcoming this resistance requires humility, patience, and a willingness to feel discomfort without immediately trying to escape it. The test of inner shadows also exposes the difference between self-awareness and self-acceptance. Awareness means recognizing that a shadow trait exists. Acceptance means embracing it as part of your wholeness. Many stop at awareness because acceptance feels too vulnerable. Yet, Without acceptance, the shadow remains fragmented, continuing to influence your life unconsciously. Acceptance does not mean acting out shadow traits. It means acknowledging their presence without shame, allowing their energy to be transformed rather than suppressed. Throughout this process, inner shadows teach invaluable lessons about compassion. When you recognize your own darkness, you become less inclined to judge others harshly. You begin to see that everyone carries hidden struggles, unspoken wounds, and rejected parts of themselves. This softens rigid moral judgments and opens the door to deeper empathy. Shadow work dismantles the illusion of separateness, showing that light and darkness coexist in every human being. Ultimately, the test of inner shadow serves as a profound initiation into authenticity. By confronting and integrating what has been hidden, you reclaim lost energy, deepen your self-understanding, and cultivate inner wholeness. The strength of a soul is not measured by how flawlessly it presents itself, but by its willingness to explore and embrace the full spectrum of its own humanity. There are few experiences in life that shake the foundations of the soul as powerfully as betrayal. It arrives like a sudden storm, tearing through the fabric of trust, dismantling expectations, and leaving behind a silence that echoes deeper than words can reach. Betrayal is not merely about someone breaking a promise or turning against you. It is a profound spiritual test that exposes illusions, dismantles attachments, and forces an encounter with truth that comfort often hides. At its core, betrayal is the collapse of an image. We build mental and emotional structures around people, relationships, institutions, and even ideals. These structures are composed of our expectations, assumptions, and the stories we tell ourselves about how things should be. Betrayal occurs when reality does not align with these internal structures. A friend you trusted deceives you. A loved one you relied on acts against your well-being. A system you believed in fails you. The pain of betrayal is not only in the action itself, but in the shattering of the image you held. When betrayal strikes, the initial reaction is often shock. The mind struggles to comprehend what has happened, replaying events, searching for missed signs, questioning how something that once felt secure could suddenly unravel. This shock can quickly transform into a mixture of anger, grief, confusion, and disbelief. The emotional intensity is high because betrayal touches the most vulnerable parts of the psyche, the need to trust, to belong, to feel safe. It reveals how much of your sense of stability was built on external anchors. This is where the spiritual dimension of betrayal begins to unfold. When external anchors collapse, you are left face to face with your inner world. The illusions that once gave comfort are stripped away, and what remains is the raw, unfiltered truth. The test of betrayal is not about preventing pain. It is about how you navigate this collapse and what you discover in the rubble. Many react by clinging tightly to their broken expectations, seeking explanations, demanding closure, or attempting to restore what was lost exactly as it was before. But betrayal marks a threshold. Once crossed, the landscape of the soul is forever changed. Betrayal also functions as a mirror, revealing hidden dependencies and attachments. Often, the depth of the pain is directly proportional to the degree of emotional investment and idealization you placed in the other person or system. If you built your sense of identity, safety, or worth around that connection, betrayal feels like a personal collapse. This is why betrayal can be so transformative. It exposes where you outsourced your inner stability to external forces. It challenges you to retrieve that power and anchor it within yourself rather than in the shifting loyalties of others. The test of betrayal also forces you to confront the tension between idealism and reality. Humans often see others through lenses of hope, desire, and projection. We elevate people to symbolic roles they were never meant to fulfill, seeing them as saviors, unshakable allies, or embodiments of our ideals. Betrayal rips away these projections, revealing the complexity and fallibility of human nature. It is a painful unveiling, but it is also an opportunity to relate to reality more clearly without the distortions of fantasy. During this test, emotions can fluctuate unpredictably. One moment there is rage at the betrayal, the next deep sorrow, then numbness or even misplaced guilt. These fluctuations are natural, reflecting the psyche's attempt to integrate the rupture. Some people repress their feelings, building walls of bitterness to protect themselves. Others collapse inward, turning the betrayal into self-blame, questioning their worth or judgment. The spiritual challenge lies in neither hardening nor collapsing, but allowing the experience to illuminate deeper truths about trust, boundaries, and resilience. Betrayal also exposes egoic attachments to control. Trust, when based on illusion, often carries an unconscious expectation that others will act according to your narrative. When they don't, the ego feels powerless and destabilized. The test of betrayal challenges this illusion by showing that others have their own paths, motives, and shadows that may diverge from yours. It reveals the limits of control and invites a more mature, reality-based understanding of human connections. This test is particularly intense because betrayal often involves people who occupied intimate spaces in your life: friends, partners, family members, or mentors. The closer the bond, the deeper the impact. Such betrayals are not merely interpersonal ruptures. They often trigger old wounds from childhood or past experiences. A betrayal in adulthood might echo the emotional pain of early trust violations, amplifying the response and making it feel overwhelming. Recognizing these echoes is crucial to understanding the full depth of what betrayal brings to the surface. Another layer of this test involves confronting your own shadow in the betrayal. It is easy to focus exclusively on the wrongs of the other, but betrayal often reveals hidden dynamics within yourself as well. Perhaps you ignored red flags because you didn't want to face discomfort. Perhaps you projected unrealistic ideals onto someone. Perhaps part of you needed the illusion more than the truth. These are difficult admissions, but they are essential for growth. The test of betrayal is not only about the other's actions, it's also about your willingness to see your own unconscious participation in the narrative. Betrayal also tests your capacity for discernment and boundaries. After betrayal, some respond by closing their hearts completely, vowing never to trust again. Others swing to the opposite extreme, ignoring what happened and allowing the same patterns to repeat. Both reactions are defenses against the deeper work the betrayal invites. The real task is learning to hold clear boundaries without shutting down emotionally, to rebuild trust with wisdom rather than fear, and to refine your discernment so that trust is placed where it is earned rather than blindly given. This test strips away illusions surrounding loyalty and permanence. It reveals that relationships and systems are fluid, that people change, and that human behavior is often driven by complex motives beyond your control. It challenges sentimental notions of unconditional trust and asks you to ground your sense of safety within yourself. It asks you to navigate the landscape of human imperfection with clear eyes and a resilient heart. Betrayal, in its essence, is an initiation into deeper levels of awareness. It dismantles false securities, exposes hidden attachments, and demands inner reorganization. What feels like destruction on the surface is often the soul's way of clearing the ground for more authentic structures to emerge. It is a test that few welcome, but one that profoundly shapes the trajectory of inner growth. There is a unique kind of spiritual trial that doesn't arrive through conflict, betrayal, or darkness, but through waiting. It's subtle, quiet, and often invisible to others, yet it can test the soul more deeply than dramatic struggles. This is the test of delayed timing, a phase in which life seems to pause, where doors that once appeared open suddenly remain closed, and where efforts that were once fruitful yield no immediate results. It's in this suspension between desire and manifestation that the strength of patience, trust, and inner alignment is measured. Delayed timing occurs when the outer reality does not match the inner readiness. You may feel prepared, inspired, and certain about the direction you want to move in, yet circumstances don't cooperate. Opportunities stall. People remain unresponsive. Plans unfold slower than expected. It's a strange between space where your vision is clear, but the path to it seems obstructed by invisible forces. This is not a punishment. It is a deliberate spiritual design meant to refine the soul's capacity to align with divine rhythms rather than personal timelines. The modern world struggles with waiting. Everything is designed for speed, efficiency, and instant gratification. When results don't come quickly, frustration builds and self-doubt creeps in. But spiritual development does not follow human impatience. It unfolds according to deeper cycles of growth. The test of delayed timing pushes against the ego's desire for control. It reveals how much of your faith is conditional on things happening the way you expect. It exposes whether your commitment to your path is genuine or dependent on immediate rewards. This test often begins subtly. You might be working towards something important, a dream, a goal, a transformation, and at first everything seems to flow. Signs appear, synchronicities align, motivation surges. Then suddenly the momentum slows, calls go unanswered, opportunities dry up, creative energy feels blocked, and progress seems to halt without explanation. The natural instinct is to push harder, to force movement, to question whether you made the right choice. But delayed timing is not solved by force. It is navigated through surrender and alignment. One of the reasons this test is so challenging is that it confronts your relationship with uncertainty. Waiting creates a psychological tension between what you desire and what currently exists. This tension brings up fears, fear of missing out, fear of failure, fear that the universe has forgotten you. The mind begins spinning narratives to fill the silence, imagining worst-case scenarios, comparing your timeline to others, and feeding impatience. These fears are not signs of failure. They are the very material this test is meant to reveal and refine. The test of delayed timing also acts as a mirror, reflecting inner misalignments that might not have been visible when things were moving quickly. When activity slows down, the inner landscape becomes more noticeable. Unconscious beliefs about worth, success, and identity rise to the surface. If your sense of value depends on constant progress, waiting will feel unbearable. If your faith is rooted only in visible results, silence will shake it. Delayed timing exposes these hidden attachments, inviting you to build a foundation that is not dependent on external validation. Patience in this context is not passive. It is an active, conscious stillness, a deliberate choice to remain aligned with your vision even when nothing seems to be happening. Patience is often misunderstood as simply waiting for time to pass, but spiritually, it means holding your inner state steady in the face of uncertainty. It is a discipline of trust, a quiet strength that says, even if I cannot see the unfolding, I will not abandon my deeper knowing. This level of patience is cultivated only through experience, not theory. Delayed timing also plays a crucial role in preparing unseen elements for future breakthroughs. Just because you don't see movement doesn't mean nothing is happening. Like seeds planted in the soil, growth often occurs beneath the surface before any visible signs appear. Connections are forming, circumstances are rearranging, and your own inner readiness is maturing in ways that are not immediately obvious. This hidden preparation period ensures that when the right moment arrives, you have the depth and stability to handle what you asked for. This test frequently brings ego timelines into conflict with divine timing. The ego has its own expectations. I should have achieved this by now. This opportunity must happen at this moment. If it doesn't happen soon, it's not meant to be. Divine timing, however, operates with intricate precision, taking into account factors beyond your immediate perception. The gap between these timelines is where frustration lives, but it's also where faith grows. This gap teaches surrender, not resignation, but a mature trust that life's unfolding is intelligent, even when you don't fully understand it. Another dimension of this test involves identity refinement. Delays often occur because who you are today is not fully aligned with the reality you are trying to create. The waiting period becomes as a crucible in which aspects of your identity, beliefs, or habits that cannot sustain your future vision are brought to the surface. This is why delays often coincide with unexpected personal growth spurts, sudden realizations, emotional healing, or changes in perspective that reshape your understanding of what you truly need. The delay is not blocking you. It is transforming you so that you can meet your future from a place of authenticity. The test of delayed timing also challenges your ability to maintain inner stability amid outer stagnation. When progress is visible, motivation comes easily. But when everything seems still, sustaining motivation requires deeper anchoring. This is where spiritual maturity develops in the quiet, uneventful spaces where no applause is given, no signs appear, and you must rely solely on your inner compass. Delayed timing teaches the difference between inspiration that depends on external momentum and inspiration that arises from within. Relationships, careers, and personal goals are common arenas where this test manifests. Perhaps you are ready for a relationship that hasn't appeared, or a career opportunity that seems to remain just out of reach, or a creative project that hasn't yet found its moment. In each scenario, the delay forces you to confront expectations, cultivate patience, refine clarity, and deepen trust. It's a humbling process because it reveals how much of your sense of progress is tied to external timelines rather than internal alignment. This test also reveals the hidden wisdom of pauses. Not every moment of life is meant to be filled with movement. There are seasons for action and seasons for gestation. Delayed timing creates space for integration, reflection, and maturation. It allows insights to settle, perspectives to deepen, and emotional states to stabilize. Rushing through this phase would be like digging up seeds to check their growth. It disrupts the natural unfolding. Delayed timing ultimately functions as a spiritual mirror, revealing the quality of your trust, the strength of your patience, and the authenticity of your commitment. It is one of the most transformative tests precisely because it appears so uneventful on the surface. Yet beneath that stillness, profound shifts are taking place within the soul, and the fabric of reality itself. Among the many spiritual trials the soul encounters, few are as revealing and transformative as the test of power. Unlike tests that arrive through suffering, silence, or betrayal, this one often emerges during moments of elevation. It comes when influence expands, when abilities grow sharper, when positions of authority or recognition appear. It is a test disguised as success. Where suffering tests resilience, power tests character. It exposes what truly governs your inner world, your ego or your higher self. Power does not only refer to political or financial dominance. It includes any situation in which your actions, decisions, or presence carry greater impact than before. This could be professional advancement, spiritual influence, increased knowledge, creative authority, or personal growth that gives you more control over yourself and your environment. Power magnifies what already exists within. It doesn't corrupt by itself, it simply removes the masks and amplifies hidden tendencies. If there are unresolved ego structures within, power will bring them to the surface like a floodlight. This test often arrives subtly. You may have worked for years toward a goal, cultivated your abilities, and finally reached a position where others listen to you, rely on you, or follow your lead. At first, this expansion feels exciting and affirming, but slowly new challenges emerge. People treat you differently. Your words have more weight. Opportunities increase. Temptations appear in more sophisticated forms. Decisions carry wider consequences. In this environment, the soul is faced with critical questions. Will you use power to serve or to dominate? Will it elevate your consciousness or inflate your ego? The test of power examines how you hold authority when no one can correct you, and how you treat others when they have less influence. When you are powerless, it is easy to speak of justice, compassion, and humility. But when power is placed in your hands, your true nature is revealed. The ego, if left unchecked, thrives on control, recognition, and superiority. It begins to see power as proof of specialness rather than responsibility. This is why some of the greatest moral collapses occur not in times of hardship, but in times of triumph. One of the subtle dangers of this test is spiritual pride. As individuals grow in awareness, knowledge, or ability, they may begin to unconsciously place themselves above others. The mind starts comparing, I understand more, I've achieved more, I'm on a higher path. This silent inflation creates a psychological separation between self and others. What was once a journey of growth can turn into a stage for ego performance. This is not always visible to the individual because the ego disguises pride as confidence, superiority as wisdom, and control as leadership. The test of power also examines how well you remain anchored to your values when opportunities for gain, influence, or dominance arise. Power can tempt individuals to compromise their integrity for personal advantage. Decisions that were once clear in times of humility become murky under the allure of more influence. People may justify manipulative actions as strategic or ignore their moral compass because they believe their elevated position exempts them from ordinary accountability. These rationalizations are symptoms of ego expansion under power's light. Another layer of this test involves the use of power in relationships. When you hold more influence, whether emotional, intellectual, social, or spiritual, how you interact with those who look up to you becomes a mirror of your maturity. Do you empower them or subtly make them dependent on you? Do you uplift their autonomy or reinforce your own status by keeping them small? Many fail this test by unconsciously enjoying the feeling of being needed, admired, or obeyed. They begin to define their worth through others' reliance on them, which creates subtle dynamics of control masked as care. This test doesn't only examine interpersonal behavior, it also explores your relationship with yourself. Power increases choices. With more ability comes more responsibility for how you direct your energy. Some people lose themselves in overextension, believing they must control everything. Others become addicted to the sense of superiority, chasing more influence to maintain an internal high. A spiritually mature response to power requires a grounded center that remains stable regardless of external elevation. It involves remembering that power is not ownership, it is stewardship. Throughout history, countless figures have demonstrated both the failure and triumph of this test. Leaders who began with noble intentions have been undone by pride once they tasted power. Individuals who rose from humble beginnings have forgotten their origins and treated others with the same cruelty they once suffered. But there are also those who, when given power, used it as a tool to uplift, to build, to heal, and to guide without losing their humility. Their power became a reflection of their inner alignment rather than their ego's appetite. One of the most profound aspects of the test of power is how it exposes unresolved inner wounds. Many people seek power unconsciously to compensate for feelings of inadequacy or vulnerability. Once power is attained, these wounds don't disappear, they get magnified. A person who seeks control because they once felt powerless may become authoritarian when in charge. Someone who craved admiration to soothe hidden shame may become obsessed with validation. Power amplifies, and whatever is unresolved within will be projected outward through decisions, behaviors, and relationships. This test also confronts the illusion of control. Power can create a seductive sense that one can shape all outcomes, bend reality to one's will, or dictate others' paths. But true spiritual growth reveals that control is always partial and temporary. Power without humility leads to overreach, burnout, or collapse. The test asks whether you can hold power lightly, using it responsibly without becoming consumed by it. Can you act decisively while acknowledging the larger forces that move beyond your control? An essential component of navigating this test is self-awareness. When you notice changes in how you think, speak, or treat others after gaining influence, those are signals. If criticism suddenly feels threatening, if disagreement feels like disrespect, if humility starts to feel unnecessary, then the ego has begun to weave itself into your identity as the powerful one. Regular introspection, honest feedback, and spiritual grounding practices are crucial to keep power from becoming a distorting mirror. The test of power is not about rejecting influence or hiding from leadership. It is about learning to embody power without losing integrity, to wield it without becoming its servant, and to let it flow through you without attaching your identity to it. This test is one of the most decisive spiritual thresholds because the consequences of failure ripple outward, affecting not only your journey, but also the lives of those within your sphere of influence. It reveals whether the soul can remain anchored in truth when given the ability to shape the world around it. Among the deepest and most transformative spiritual trials, the test of letting go stands as a quiet yet fierce threshold. Unlike tests that involve clear challenges such as betrayal, temptation, or power, this one unfolds in the intimate space between the known and the unknown. It is the moment when life asks you to release something you have held tightly, whether it be a person, a belief, a role, a dream, or an identity that has shaped you. This test rarely comes with loud announcements. It often arrives disguised as endings, changes, or slow unravelings that push you toward a new chapter before you feel ready. Letting go is not merely about physical separation. It is a psychological and spiritual act that touches the deepest layers of attachment, control, and identity. It exposes the bonds you have formed, not only with people and things, but also with versions of yourself. The human mind clings to familiarity because it provides a sense of safety and continuity. Even when something no longer serves your growth, the pull of habit and memory can make release feel threatening. This is why letting go often feels like a kind of inner death, as if a part of who you were is being dissolved to make space for something not yet born. This test often begins subtly. A job that once fulfilled you starts to feel confining. A relationship that once felt alive begins to lose its harmony. A long-held dream starts to feel misaligned with your deeper truth. These are signals, not punishments. Life is signaling that evolution requires release. But the ego resists endings, fearing loss, failure, or emptiness. It tries to fix, control, or hold tighter, believing that security comes from maintaining what is known. This resistance intensifies the pain of the transition, turning natural cycles of change into emotional storms. Letting go challenges the illusion of control more directly than almost any other spiritual test. Much of human suffering arises from the attempt to control what is inherently transient. People try to control outcomes, hold on to relationships beyond their natural lifespan, or cling to identities that once made sense but no longer reflect who they are becoming. The more tightly you cling, the more life eventually pries your fingers open. This is not cruelty, it is the way growth unfolds. Every stage of becoming requires a shedding of what no longer aligns, much like a tree must release its leaves before winter. One of the reasons this test cuts so deeply is that it forces you to confront emotional attachments that are intertwined with your sense of self. You might not just be letting go of a relationship, but of the version of yourself that existed within that relationship. You might not just be releasing a career, but also the identity, status, or dreams that were attached to it. This is why letting go can feel disorienting, because the psyche must reorganize itself without the familiar reference points it once relied upon. The test of letting go is not about cold detachment or emotional suppression. It is about conscious release, an inner posture that recognizes when something has served its purpose and honors it by allowing it to move on. True letting go involves both grief and gratitude. Grief for what is ending and gratitude for what it gave. When these two emotions are allowed to coexist, release becomes an act of respect rather than resistance. The difficulty arises when people cling to denial, refusing to acknowledge the ending, or when they numb themselves to avoid feeling the full weight of the transition. This test often unfolds through life transitions that are unavoidable: the end of childhood, the death of loved ones, the closing of chapters, the evolution of relationships, or the transformation of personal dreams. In each case, something that was once essential must be laid down. These moments are spiritual crossroads. If you refuse to let go, you remain anchored to a past that cannot return. If you release with awareness, you create space for the new to emerge. This space is uncomfortable because it is empty at first, and humans are instinctively uneasy with emptiness. But this void is not a vacuum of loss. It is the womb of transformation, the silent chamber where future possibilities gestate. Letting go also reveals the depth of your trust in life's unfolding. Many people believe they trust until they are asked to release something precious. Then fear surfaces: fear of the unknown, fear of regret, fear of being left without direction. These fears are natural, but they also expose how conditional trust can be. The test invites you to shift your trust from external forms to the deeper current of life itself. It asks whether you believe that even when something leaves, meaning and growth remain. The ego's identity structures often become the greatest barrier during this test. The ego builds its sense of self around attachments. Now, I am this person's partner. I am this professional role. I am someone who lives here. I am the one who achieved this dream. When those external markers shift, the ego panics because it equates change with annihilation. But the soul understands that identity is fluid and that clinging to outdated forms prevents expansion. Letting go, therefore, is less about losing something and more about returning to a deeper self that exists beyond the roles you've played. Another crucial dimension of this test involves emotional honesty. Many people try to bypass the pain of letting go by pretending they are over it, too quickly spiritualizing their detachment or distracting themselves with new pursuits. But authentic release cannot happen if emotions are suppressed or ignored. Tears, sorrow, nostalgia, and even anger are part of the letting go process. They are not signs of weakness, but signs that the psyche is metabolizing the transition. When these emotions are felt fully, without clinging to them, they move through naturally, clearing the inner space for new growth. This test also exposes hidden attachments that were previously unconscious. Sometimes you may believe you have let go, only to discover lingering emotional cords when something reminds you of the past. These moments are not regressions. They are invitations to deepen the release, to find subtler layers of attachment and bring them to light. Each layer released frees more energy, clarity, and inner peace. The test of letting go can occur multiple times throughout life, often at increasing levels of subtlety. Early stages might involve releasing tangible things like relationships or jobs. Later stages involve releasing internal constructs, beliefs, expectations, identities, even cherished spiritual experiences. Each layer removed brings you closer to a state of inner freedom, where your sense of self is no longer bound by external circumstances, but anchored in the deeper flow of being itself. Ultimately, this test functions as a profound mirror. It reveals the ways you cling, the illusions you hold, and the places where fear still governs your choices. It also reveals your capacity for trust, your resilience in the face of change, and your willingness to embrace the unknown without demanding guarantees. letting go is both a surrender and a transformation, a dismantling of what was to make room for what is yet to come.